When he saw his beloved wife with her organs brutally taken out, the husband instantly imagined 100 ways to make the killer pay. But what he never expected was that the suffering his wife endured before she died was far beyond anyone's imagination. Even more horrifying, his adorable 8-year-old daughter had also mysteriously disappeared. Yet no one knew that this heartbroken father was actually a professional assassin feared by both the underworld and the authorities, even when surrounded by dozens of gangsters wielding knives. He never showed a trace of panic, but the memory of his wife's pained expression burned inside him, and In-nam could no longer suppress the fury in his heart, vowing to make the murderer pay the most terrible price in his own way. The day before his daughter went missing, she was just like any other day, asking her mother to take her to school, but no one imagined that the seemingly kind nanny would lure the little girl into a battered black car after school. The reason the mother didn't pick up her daughter herself was because of a crooked broker. He had calculated the exact time school ended, deliberately arranged a fake business meeting, and gave the waiting nanny a perfect chance to take the child away, since the two of them were actually human traffickers. When the woman learned her beloved daughter had been kidnapped, she rushed to the police station in panic, but the police refused to file a report, saying, "It hasn't been 24 hours since the disappearance, so we can't open a case." That absurd rule pushed her step by step into the abyss. After receiving a ransom call from the kidnappers, she went alone to the designated location without hesitation, only to end up cruelly killed. When In-nam, who was abroad, got the news, his wife was already lying in the cold morgue, and within just a few days, he had lost the two people he loved most, a pain no one could endure. So In-nam traveled alone to the crime scene and found the only private detective brave enough to take the case. And after layers of investigation, they finally tracked down the broker behind the human trafficking ring, because right after his wife's death, all her money had been transferred into this man's account. But instead of confessing, the broker threatened In-nam, saying, "Let me go now, or I'll have you chopped to pieces." That blatant provocation ignited In-nam's long-suppressed rage. He pulled out a sharp pair of scissors and aimed to cut off the man's thumb.
아니지.
The broker finally realized how serious things had become and stammered that he had killed the wife just for money. But when In-nam asked where the child was, he pretended not to understand. So In-nam turned the scissors toward his ear. When he heard the words the daughter was killed by the nanny, In-nam's already shattered world collapsed completely, but it only strengthened his determination for revenge. He grabbed the man's hair and pressed the scissors against his neck. That night, the nanny was calmly cooking dinner at home when the lights suddenly went out, and when they flickered back on, she and her husband were already tied up by In-nam. Without a hint of hesitation, In-nam pulled out the same sharp scissors and showed them a photo of his missing daughter, but the nanny pretended to know nothing. Seeing how stubborn she was, In-nam made a terrifying decision. He began cutting off her husband's fingers one by one. When he heard that the daughter was still alive, In-nam's eyes widened, and for the first time in a long while, a ray of light pierced his broken world. The nanny hadn't killed the girl but had sold her to an underground organization that trafficked organs, though she no longer knew where the child was. Hearing this, the last shred of reason inside In-nam snapped. With a chilling sound, he twisted the couple's necks and ended their lives. To find his beloved daughter as quickly as possible, In-nam asked the private detective to connect him with a woman named Yui to guide the way, and after tireless effort, they finally managed to contact the black market by pretending to buy organs. Soon, a rusty van pulled up near them, but the real location of the deal was still unknown. When they were led through a heavy door, what they saw froze them in shock. Inside the cramped room were children from different countries, locked up like prisoners, their eyes filled with fear and despair, treated like items for sale. Since he still hadn't seen his daughter, In-nam said he only wanted Korean children, but the woman's next words made his blood boil. She said, "Yes, there was a 9-year-old Korean girl yesterday, but she's already been reserved." In-nam said he would pay double to get her back, but realizing they had other motives, the woman kicked them out, which completely enraged him. When the guards were gone, In-nam kicked open the lock of the holding room and asked the children if they had seen the girl. A little boy slowly stood up and said she had been taken for surgery. By surgery, he meant organ removal, and the boy even knew where it was happening. Just as they were about to act, a group of armed traffickers burst in, so Yui pretended to be a passerby, but they didn't believe her. In-nam grabbed one of the women by the neck and demanded, "Where is my daughter?" She said only that someone wanted the girl's heart and she might already be on the operating table, but she didn't know the exact location, which made In-nam furious. After getting the location from the boy, they immediately headed there, but before they could reach it, the woman was suddenly stabbed to death, and even the ruthless guard was taken down by a mysterious man. When In-nam saw his face, he froze. It was the infamous killer known as Ray the Butcher. In-nam told Yui to take the child and run, while he stayed to face Ray in a fight to the death. And the reason Ray had chased him across countries was because of a Japanese man, Kurita. When Ray saw his brother Kurita's throat slit open, he imagined 100 ways to make the killer pay. But what he never expected was that the suffering his brother endured before death was beyond imagination. 10 minutes before Kurita's death, he had received a strange phone call. The caller kept repeating his name but never explained the reason for calling. The call made him uneasy, so he called his bodyguards downstairs, but there was only silence. Clearly, In-nam had already eliminated them. Kurita grabbed his shotgun, ready to fire at the intruder, but as soon as he drew the curtains, the lights went out, and the next second, In-nam had him pinned. In-nam had come for one purpose. Kurita was a ruthless killer who had taken many innocent lives, and after receiving the bounty, In-nam came to end him. After confirming Kurita was dead, In-nam calmly walked away. But Ray, his half-brother, was consumed with rage. That same night, the middleman who had hired In-nam for the job was captured by Ray. When he woke up, he found himself tightly bound, and Ray stood before him in a clear raincoat, holding a sharp knife. Ray enjoyed watching his enemies suffer before their final breath. The fear of death swallowed the middleman whole, but his fate was already sealed. The mentor who had supported In-nam for 20 years also met a tragic end at Ray's hands. Although the mentor never betrayed In-nam, Ray still found a missing person notice at the scene. It said that In-nam's daughter had disappeared in Thailand. Following that clue, Ray set out for Thailand, and before long, he really did uncover In-nam's trail. Fueled by rage, Ray tracked him all the way to an abandoned warehouse, but when he stepped inside, he realized there was no sign of In-nam. Instead, the place was packed with thugs wielding machetes. Their plan was to cut out Ray's kidney and drain him of all his money, but what they didn't know was that the line between hunter and prey had already been drawn. After briefly rinsing his face with ice water, Ray began asking where In-nam was. The man in the red shirt gasped for air, finally confessing everything, not only revealing In-nam's exact location but even begging to personally collect the bodies of his fallen comrades. Using the man's confession as a lead, Ray slaughtered his way toward In-nam's location, knowing that what awaited them would be a storm of blood and vengeance. As In-nam drew a sharp knife, Ray pulled out an even larger blade, determined to split his enemy's head in two. Only then did Ray realize that In-nam's skill was far beyond his imagination, and from Ray's merciless strikes, In-nam also understood that this gaunt man before him was no ordinary opponent. Since every move Ray made aimed to kill, In-nam knew he had to get out quickly, but In-nam wasn't running because he was afraid his daughter had been kidnapped by traffickers, and even a moment's delay could mean losing her forever. Seizing a brief opening, In-nam locked Ray outside and searched the building for a way to escape. Enraged, Ray kicked and shouted from behind the door, but could only watch helplessly as In-nam smashed open a window and climbed down the emergency ladder to freedom. By the time Ray burst through to the balcony, In-nam had already vanished into the crowd. Yet to Ray's surprise, that same night, In-nam called him just to taunt him.
더 이상 쫓아오면 내 손에 죽는다.
난 너와 연관된 인간들을 모두 죽일 거야. 전부 네가 자초한 일이야.
Furious at such bold provocation, Ray stormed into a gun shop, planning to borrow some heavy firepower from the owner.
I heard you deal with Chop. What do you say? Call them to come.
After knocking the man unconscious, Ray took every grenade in sight, along with several shotguns and hundreds of rounds of ammo. Meanwhile, In-nam had finally traced his daughter's whereabouts, but facing a group of traffickers armed with real guns, In-nam made a near-suicidal decision he would take his daughter back by force. The little girl was about to have her last meal before the traffickers took her heart, but what they didn't expect was that her father was none other than the elevator god of war, In-nam. Even surrounded by dozens of gangsters with blades, he remained calm and unshaken, but seeing his beloved daughter in their hands, his fury exploded. He would make them pay the ultimate price. Slamming the accelerator to the floor, In-nam chased the car carrying his daughter, but just as he was about to catch up, his old nemesis Ray suddenly appeared, blocking the road. As bullets poured down like rain, In-nam was forced to pull back, flooring the car in reverse, but before he could recover, a convoy of heavily armed police slammed into the chaos, aiming to capture everyone in one sweep. Caught between wolves in front and a tiger behind, In-nam made a decisive choice. He charged straight into the wolves, because the tiger behind him, Ray, was far more terrifying. The police soon realized they were up against three sides of lethal opponents, so they called in fully armed special forces to take Ray down once and for all. But this only drove Ray into a furious rampage. Watching his enemy In-nam disappear from sight, Ray could no longer contain his rage. He swore to make every officer there pay dearly. Even under a barrage of gunfire, Ray remained eerily calm, because he had already thought of a deranged way to escape. Fortunately, In-nam arrived just in time to save his daughter, who was moments away from a fatal surgery. But the fierce battle had shaken all of Thailand. The entire human trafficking and drug network was exposed and wiped out by the police. Yet to everyone's shock, the operation turned out to be run by Ran, the most ruthless crime lord in Thailand, with several high-ranking officials secretly under his control. Watching his empire crumble overnight, Ran exploded with rage. He vowed to make everyone responsible suffer the ultimate price. Meanwhile, In-nam, the legendary elevator god of war, was now stranded in a foreign land, with no allies and no legal way to leave. To smuggle his daughter out safely, he asked Yui, the woman he had met in Thailand, to take care of the terrified girl while he arranged their passage. But Yui was paralyzed by fear. She didn't want to risk her life any longer, knowing that both the mad butcher Ray and the ruthless kingpin Ran could find and kill them at any moment. When Yui hung up the phone, In-nam was overwhelmed by despair and helplessness. Still, for the sake of his daughter, he risked everything, stopping at a clothing store to buy her a new outfit and a cute stuffed toy, before moving them to a warmer, safer hotel. Because ever since his daughter was deceived and taken by traffickers, she had suffered from severe depression. The only thing In-nam could do, was to help her heal slowly with love. When he saw his daughter open her arms to hug him, all of In-nam's emotions finally burst free. Being hunted by the underworld, chased by the police, betrayed by humanity, and crushed by despair and helplessness, every ounce of pain he had carried melted away in his daughter's warm embrace. But noticing her vacant eyes and stiff movements, In-nam made another risky decision. He decided to call a psychologist immediately to examine her mental state. Fortunately, the doctor said she wasn't in serious condition. However, just as the doctor was about to leave, In-nam suddenly stopped him and asked, "Please, watch over my daughter for a while." I need to take care of something urgent. He had no idea that this seemingly harmless decision made out of love for his daughter would become the one thing he regretted for the rest of his life. When In-nam returned to the hotel after buying the boat tickets, the elevator was already filled with men holding machetes. After taking down the hitmen on the ground floor, he realized the entire hallway was also crawling with killers. Once his bullets ran out, In-nam launched into brutal hand-to-hand combat even without his gun. His strength was terrifying. He broke one attacker's arm with sheer force, and another charged from behind, but by then, In-nam had completely lost control. Locking his legs around an opponent's neck, he twisted hard until the man's spine cracked. When the hallway finally fell silent, In-nam looked down to see a knife buried deep in his abdomen, but he ignored the pain. His daughter was in danger. He kicked open the bedroom door, only to find that Ray had already been waiting for him. After Rand's trafficking network was wiped out by the police, Ray had formed a new alliance with the crime lord, which meant everyone in that room now worked for Rand. Seeing the psychologist lying dead with his throat cut, In-nam desperately pleaded with Ray to spare his daughter's life. But Ray, cold and cruel, only sneered and said he'd cut the girl to pieces, which instantly sent In-nam into a rage. He was ready for a final fight to the death. But suddenly, Ray didn't kill him right away, not because he feared In-nam, but because he wanted to take him back to his slaughterhouse to savor the act of gutting his enemy and watching him bleed out. Just as Ray's men were about to drag him away, a car came crashing toward them. It was Yui. She had come back, moved by In-nam's determination to save his daughter. Freed from his restraints, In-nam made one last decision to face Ray head-on in a final, no-return battle to rescue his daughter. With Ray's neck trapped in his grip, In-nam wrestled for control as Ray fired wildly. Trying to break free, neither noticed the car spiraling out of control. With a thunderous crash, the vehicle slammed into a roadside stall. Hearing his daughter scream, In-nam frantically called her name, but Ray pulled out a knife and plunged it into In-nam's chest, twisting it deep. As In-nam screamed in agony, Ray grinned with twisted satisfaction, but in the chaos, In-nam's hand brushed against a grenade. A deafening explosion tore through the air, flipping the car several times. When he regained consciousness, In-nam ignored the pain tearing through his insides, rushed to the trunk, and pulled his daughter into his arms. Moments later, Yui arrived on the scene. As Yui took the girl to safety, Ray stabbed In-nam one final time. Watching his daughter disappear into the distance, In-nam finally felt at peace. But just as Ray thought victory was his, In-nam released the grenade in his hand. With one final explosion, the girl lost the father who loved her more than life itself, and Ray was blown to pieces. Later, at the harbor, Yui opened the suitcase In-nam had left behind. Inside was a bag filled with cash. Fulfilling his last wish, Yui took the girl to Panama, the peaceful place In-nam had always dreamed of, where they began a new life. Free from fear and full of hope,